So after last week, I wanted 6 fullback slots. Well, this round, I think I need 6 trades because this Teamless Tuesday has thrown up some absolute carnage. Hey guys, welcome back to A Man Talks NRL SuperCoach. Today's video, we're going through the Round 7 Teamless Tuesday, as well as what I think are going to be the best caption options for this round. There was a lot of changes to get through, so let's get straight into the video. But just quickly before that, potentially moving forward, I might add in the Teamless Tuesday and captaincy video to my other trade targets video and kind of create a bigger video where that's more of like a round preview Q&A kind of thing, and just have that and my roundups to be the 2 videos in the week. Would really appreciate your thoughts on that, guys. I've kind of posted that already on Twitter and I've had some good feedback to that suggestion. So in YouTube, I'd really be keen to see how you guys feel about that. It just helps me out a little bit just having to do the 2 videos as opposed to say the 3 videos a week. If you guys do like the video, would really appreciate a thumbs up, and do please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't done so already. My goal, as I've mentioned previously, is to get to 1,000 by the State of Origin period. So if you guys could help me get over the line, would really appreciate it. But enough the plugs, let's get into the team news. So a quick update on our overall league. So Sai from Sai Shafikar, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, he top scored last week with a massive 1,297, and our top 5 are now made up of James, Thomas, Stuart, Paul and Jesse, and I'm sneaking just behind there in number 6, but I'm going to catch you guys, I'm hot on your heels. But yeah, if you guys haven't already, do join our group league. It's a bit of fun, and I'll shout out the round top scorer and also our top 5 on a week-to-week basis. First game of the round is the Panthers taking on the Knights. Fortunately for the Panthers, not many changes to report here. The only notable thing to consider is Paul Momorowski is currently undergoing a match judiciary review, basically for that hit he did on Tom Dearden last week, and he potentially may be out for a few weeks, so definitely something to keep an eye on. If he is confirmed out, that potentially might see, I think, Tyrone Mayer move in, but we also note on the extended reserves for the Panthers, Coruscant and Dylan Edwards. So if they're getting close to return, potentially we could see maybe Dylan Edwards return early, slot back into the team. If Momorowski is confirmed out, we could just see the bit of a reshuffling. Matt Burton might be unluckily the one to make way, and the Panthers go back to that kind of original 17 they had to begin the season. So definitely something to keep an eye on Momorowski. But apart from that, no other changes for them. On the Knight side, the only enforced change for them is Heimel Hunt, who had that hamstring injury. He's now out of the 17. Stafford Toa takes his place on the wing, but apart from that, no other changes to report for the Knights. So the next game of the round are the Titans taking on the Rabbitohs. Notable change here is Tino Fasumala-Awi getting that 2-week suspension, so as a result, Mo Fodawaker takes his place in the starting front row forward position. Anthony Don takes his place actually back on the wing too, pushing out Jonas Pearson, and Sam McIntyre moves his way onto the bench. So apart from that, not many other changes to report on the Titans, and I think Tino has been a bit of a disappointment so far. He's probably going to be heavily sold this round. On the Rabbitohs side, a few changes here. Latrell has not been named because he's currently undergoing match review for his charges from last round, but he's not been named nonetheless. So as a result, Alex Johnson moves back to fullback, Dan Gagai moves back to the wing, and Stephen Masters comes in to fill in the void left by Dan Gagai at centre. Jackson Paulo also comes in for Josh Mansour. And apart from that, no other changes to report really for the Rabbitohs. Actually there is one more. Jacob Host actually drops out of the 17. Keon Kolomatangi takes his place in the starting back row. Aside from that, no more changes at the Rabbitohs. Next game will be the Eels taking on the Broncos. Big inclusion here for the Eels is Dylan Brown back from his 1-week suspension, so he slots straight back into 5'8", and Will Smith drops out of the 17. William Penasini takes his place on the bench in replacement for Keegan Hipgrave. Ryan Madison has not been named in the starting 17, but he has been named in the extended reserves, so he potentially may be a late inclusion. But again, the Eels are showing that they're still being very cautious with him. Good news for Isaiah Papali'i. That means if the Eels run out as they've been named, he greatly benefits, and he's been absolutely killing it. And good matchup here against the Broncos as well. On the Broncos side, the only notable changes here, Herbie Farnworth moves back into the centre, coming back from his shoulder injury, so Richie Kenner drops out, and John Asiata makes his way off the bench and into the reserves. Danny Levy, the new signing, comes in onto the bench, so he would play at hooker, and that potentially means that Jake Turpin, if anyone still owns him, he probably isn't likely to play 80 minutes. But the back row for the Broncos is still the same as it was last week, with Alex Glenn, Tavita Pangai Jr. and Patrick Carrigan. Jordan Ricky still on the bench, and no side of Tessie New. So if anyone like myself still held on to Tessie New, he still is looking like a bit of a sell. Actually, from what I've heard, he potentially might be doing a bit of an extended stint in the Reggies, just to get a bit of improvement potentially at defence. So I think for the time being, New is a trade out. The next game will be the Sharks taking on the Bulldogs. big talking point here, and actually one I'm really excited to see. Shaun Johnson has made his way back into the 17 from his injury, and he's named on the bench at number 15. Josh Dugan also makes his return into the centres, pushing out Teague Wilton back to the starting back row. Aiden Tolman gets a 1-week suspension. So apart from that, no real other changes. But Shaun Johnson being named back on the bench is really big news. Really keen to see how he plays, because I think he's definitely potentially a season-long keeper at halfback. But we will have to kind of see how he returns back from that pretty significant injury that he had. For the Bulldogs, big change here for them is Jack Hetherington getting that 5-game suspension. So as a result, Dylan Napa and Luke Thompson are the starting front row forwards. Jackson Tupine and Ofahiki Ogden are moved out of the 17. Ogden, I'm not as sure why, but I think Tupine has had an injury which is going to set him back for a couple of weeks. So as a result, the bench for the Bulldogs is very different. That includes changes with Brad Dietz, Ava Suman Fegai, sorry, I'm not going to do that name, and Matt Dury, and Renouf Atoni has moved back to the bench as well. Aside from that, no other changes for the Bulldogs. I think the main talking point here in terms of Supercoach will be Luke Thompson, who I think a lot of people have got a lot of interest in, coming off 2 pretty good scores. And no Josh Jackson, no Jack Hetherington means potentially his work rate will increase, so that spells good news for us. And he's definitely someone I'm potentially eyeing up to put into my front row forward or second row forward this week. Next game will be the Cowboys taking on the Raiders. Fortunately, the Cowboys are named 1 to 17, so that's very easy there. Ben Condon still in the starting back row, so he's still set to make quite a bit of money this week. I think he's got a negative break even, so anyone who owns him like myself, that's good news for us. Should see a little bit more cash out of him. On the Raiders side, big changes here. So let me just go through the outs. Josh Hodgson is out with a calf injury. I'm not sure how long that is for, but Tom Starling makes his way into the starting number 9 as a replacement. Bailey Simonson had failed his HRA from last week, so he is out of the side this week. So Sebastian Chris takes his place on the wing. Joseph Tupine has been moved to the extended reserves, as has Soliola. So that sees the inclusion of Ryan James to the starting front row forward, Corey Harionara to the bench, and Corey Horsburgh to the bench as well. Ryan Sutton will be the starting lock, Hudson Young and Elliot Whitehead the starting back row, Emery Gula, Ryan James the starting props. So big rotation here for the forwards at the Raiders. I think that's good news for Ryan James. Owners hopefully starting. He should hopefully see about 40 minutes and make about 40 to 45 points based on his base stats, and kickstart his cash rises. This is kind of why I'm not really so interested in any other Raiders forwards. Like I know Hudson Young has been potentially popular, or Ryan Sutton. There's just so much forward rotation going on at the Raiders. They've got a stacked pack. I just don't really have any kind of clarity over the minutes of any of these guys, so I'm really not interested in any of them. But yeah, big changes at the Raiders this week. For the Tigers and the Sea Eagles, the only major changes here for the Tigers will be Michael Cheekham making his way into the centres due to Asukapola unfortunately having that ACL injury, which is going to see him sidelined for the rest of the season. And just a swap between Thomas McKaylee and Alex Seyfarth from the bench to the reserves. Aside from that, no other changes here. Will be interesting to see if Nofaluma again is named on the left side. He's definitely someone I'm looking to bring in this round as well. My planned trades at the moment are still going to be potentially Tino and Tessinu out for Nofaluma and Luke Thompson, but haven't decided that. That was my kind of initial thought after seeing the team list Tuesday. But yeah, Jake Simpkin has still been named at number 9, which is very good news. Don't need to bring him in this week because this is still only his second game, but next week will be the time to jump on him if he is named again, as he will go up massively in price. For the Sea Eagles side, completely 1 to 17, no reason for them to change. There was no injuries that were enforced upon them, and Tom Trbojevic would be the big talking point. I think a lot of people with another fullback who's potentially not with us this week, Tom Trbojevic definitely becomes a big trade-in factor for this round, and against the Tigers, that's a good matchup for him. Next game are the Roosters taking on the Dragons on Anzac Day. With the Roosters, the only major changes here is that Brett Morris has been named back on the wing, so Matt Ikuvalu moves back to the extended reserves. Sam Verrills has been named at number 9, which is a big boost for the Roosters. I feel like it's the first proper time during the season that they've had an established number 9 after Jake Friend has kind of been, had to unfortunately retire due to his concussions. And that sees Adam Kieran moved out of the extended. That sees Adam Kieran move to the extended reserves as well. Lindsay Collins still named on the bench, as Ben Marshke is also moved to the bench with the re-inclusion of Sam Verrills. So the big talking point here is that Sio Takiaho is named to start. He did have that rib injury, as did Jared Huyo-Hargreaves. He's been named on the bench. So definitely good news for us owners of Takiaho. I wasn't too keen to sell him. I think he's still going to be a season-long keeper, but good to see that he's been named. The only concern potentially might be his minutes are a bit managed, so we'll just have to wait and see on that one. On the Dragon side, not many changes here. The only one is that Blake Laurie has made his return to the starting prop position, so Trent Merrin makes his way out of the entire 17, but no other changes here for the Dragons. So the final game of the round will be the Melbourne Storm taking on the Warriors. Unfortunately, the big loss here is Ryan Pappenhausen. He had that AC joint issue, and so he's been ruled out for this week, which is good news in that they gave us the news early because they do play the last game of the round, and if it was a late inclusion, that really would have stung a lot of us owners, but now we can kind of properly plan over his exclusion this week. I wouldn't be looking to sell him myself, but I've seen a lot of people on forums potentially do a bit of a fullback kind of swing, where they go from Pappenhausen to Turbo or Ponga, profit on the points and the cash rise, and potentially bring back Pappenhausen down the line. In my own head, I haven't decided the strategy yet, but either way, we'll have to kind of wait and hopefully get some more news as to maybe how long he'd be out for. If it's just a week, I'm not too keen to sell. If it's more than a week though, given how expensive he is, I think it is worthwhile to sell him at that point. But Nico Hines makes his replacement at fullback, which is very, very handy for the Storm. And Dale Finucane has made his way back into the 17, and he'll be coming off the bench this round, as does Harry Grant. So the re-inclusion of Dale Finucane now does potentially spell some bad news for Christian Welch. He's been able to profit without Dale Finucane in terms of his minutes and his points. So we'll definitely have to monitor how he goes with Dale Finucane coming back into the 17. Definitely not a priority sell, I think, for this week, but keep an eye on his minutes and his work rate with Finucane back into the 17, and then reassess from there. On the Warriors side, a few changes to note here. So Peter Hiku and Adam Pompey did pick up injuries last week, as did Paul Turner. So as a result, David Fusatua has made a return from injury, so he makes his way back onto the wing, and Bailey Sirenen is back onto the bench. Marcelo Montoya makes his way into the centres to partner Jack Murchie in the centres. Apart from that, no other changes to report for the Warriors. Big news here is that Josh Curran still is starting for this week. So Josh Curran is like 203k, and he had an absolutely monster game last week, I think scoring in the 70s and almost all of that in base. Again, he's not someone that you have to really bring in this week. You have another week to see how he goes and whether that spot is still his next week as well before you have to jump on him. So I mean, I don't hate the move to bring him in early, but there is a bit of a risk, potentially he might get injured or he might lose his place, and then you've brought in a 203k guy who's just stuck there waiting to play his third game before he goes up in price. But definitely Simpkin and Curran are probably going to be the two guys I'm going to target for next week as cheapies who will make quite a bit of coin. So I already kind of know hopefully what I'm doing next week, and God forbid there's no other injuries or suspensions that derail those plans. So now I'll get into the captains and vice captain options for this round. This week is a little bit tougher for me to actually put this together. No clear-cut standout in my mind, but there's a few decent matchups I think that we can target. So first up for vice captain options, I think Panthers against the Knights, given that Panthers play on the Thursday, make some great vice captain options, same as last week. So the two guys that I've kind of penciled in here are Jerome Luai and Nathan Cleary. You could also throw in Brian To'o into this as well. In terms of how the Knights have defended the halves, they've actually been pretty good. 7th to 5/8 and 11th to halfback. So only a few other teams have been better at defending those positions respectively. But we know the quality of the Panthers. Jerome Luai came off 81 last week when it really didn't look like he was doing much up until the last 5 minutes. And Cleary was involved, as he always is, getting a massive 125 last week. So definitely these two are very, very safe vice captain plays in my opinion. And you could even put it on Brian To'o if you think he's got a chance at getting a couple of tries as well. Cody Walker against the Titans, I think the lack of Latrell really does help Cody Walker's potential for this week. He might have a bit more of that kind of free roaming role where he's able to go on both sides of the field, and we saw that during periods last year. That's really when he can rack up the attacking stats, and we saw the Titans get 36 points pumped on them last week, and that was against Manly. Who knows what the Rabbitohs can do with their absolutely electric attack. So Cody Walker, I think he's had a bit of a quiet few games. He's been involved, but he hasn't had that massive breakout game that I think we were all kind of waiting for. So I think this potentially could be the week. Titans have actually been pretty good at defending 5/8, 14th. So there's only two other teams who've been better at defending that position. But we saw last week that they got points pummeled against them, and I don't see why the Rabbitohs can't do the same. So I think Cody Walker is a great, punty captain shout for this week. Same game, but different team. Dave Fifita, he scored 78 last week, and it really seemed like he did nothing to earn the 78. So, we know that his base and power is so good that his floor is very, very high. So he can easily get 65 to 70 just with a few tackle breaks and runs. If you potentially get some attacking stats against the Rabbitohs, he could go into the hundreds. It is a bit more of a punty captain option. I don't think I'm going to go there myself this week, but if you want to kind of have maybe a safer 80, you can go with someone like Fifita. Reed Marnie, I think if I owned, I would definitely be looking to captain him. I think he's a really, really good punt for this week. Coming up against the Broncos, who are the 4th worst at defending against hooker position, and Reed Marnie's coming off another ton last week. I've kind of tweeted that I think Reed Marnie and Harry Grant are looking like the 2 number 9s to get long term this season, and I still stand by that. He does have added benefits long term in that the Eels do play round 13 and their draw coming up is very, very good. So Reed Marnie specifically for this week though, I think could be a great captaincy shout. Tom Trbojevic makes his way into the captain's video for the first time this year. We saw last week what he did, scoring a massive 116. And coming up against the Tigers, who are the 3rd worst team at defending fullbacks, there's no reason why Tommy Turbo can't do it again. He just hit the ground running. It just looked absolutely electric. Didn't seem like the hamstring was bothering him at all, which is exactly what we want to see. And he's very, very cheap. 590k versus all these other fullback options makes him more on the cheaper end, which is unbelievable to think that Tom Trbojevic can be considered cheap in SuperCoach, but there you go. So if you get him into your team this week, I think throwing the captaincy armband on him is a really great play too. One man who's looking a bit overlooked and he's being doubted, our guy James Tedesco. Can you believe that? It's like, how quick does this season go? Start of the season, everyone had him in their team, or almost everyone, and everyone was captaining him, and now he's being sold. He's not being captained at all. It's crazy. I'm backing him in for a good week this week. I think the re-inclusion of Sam Verrills hopefully does help the spine of the Roosters set a little bit. And we saw last week they were coming up against the Storm, who are one of the best teams in the competition defensively. I think coming up against the Dragons, who've actually been pretty solid in defense as well. 6th worst at defending fullback, so I think there potentially is scope for Teddy. But playing on Anzac Day, it's a big occasion. I feel like the Roosters are really going to turn around their performances. And I think I'm potentially looking at captaining Teddy this week. Don't think I'm going to be selling him. I think I've got other priorities to fix in my team. So I think, well, he's still in my team. Why not throw the captaincy armband on him? It could be a pod move at this rate, and one that hopefully pays off for me. So Teddy, I'm backing him for a big score this week. And finally, backing a couple of the Storm boys, Cam Munster and Harry Grant. With no Pappenhausen, I believe Cam Munster is going to be kicking goals this week. So that really hopefully does add to his point scoring for this round. I feel like he hasn't really exploded yet, but I feel like potentially it could be this week. Warriors have actually been pretty good at defending 5/8, 12th best in the comp, but we know that Cam Munster, he plays big in the big games, And while necessarily the Warriors aren't like a big game, it's Anzac Day, it's a special occasion, and I think he's due for a massive score. And no Pappenhausen, when he's got the goal kicking, could be the occasion. He got 67 last week when it really seemed like he was having a bit of a quieter game. So I think he could be backing in for 100 plus this round. And Harry Grant, we saw what he did last week, scoring 98 off the bench. I don't see any reason why he can't do similar damage against the Warriors. They've been the 9th best team at defending hookers, so pretty good. But we know that Harry Grant is probably the best hooker in the game, so he can score big against anyone. So if you own Cam Munster, I think he's a great captain pick for this round. And if you go early on Harry Grant, why not throw the armband on him too? Alright guys, that's the round 7 Teamless Tuesday and captaincy summary. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, would really appreciate a thumbs up, and do please consider subscribing to the channel. But apart from that, I'll see you guys in the next video.